And the topic tonight is Jumpstart to the Holidays. I think Dr. Connor and I are excited to present it because we also could use a little dose of holiday de-stressing, especially in this time. So we'll get started. So the first slide here is just sort of an acknowledgement of the multiple stressors of the holiday season. Some of these are due to just general things that come up around the time of the holidays. Some of these are a product of being at NYU for many different reasons. So whether it's having a health condition, a disability, caring for people with these conditions, that, holidays aside, is also something very stressful. And we're also living in a time that I think no one is going to necessarily look back on fondly of the COVID-19 pandemic. So 2020 certainly so far is not winning any awards for calmest year here. So this pie chart is just a sampling of some of the stressors that people might come up against. By no means is it an exhaustive list of probably everything that everyone tuning in is facing. So just to kind of go through some, even in the best of times, the holidays can really be stressful for so many reasons. So of course, family dynamics is usually up there. I think having expectations either for how things will go and often having sort of a rosy view of what the holidays mean and perhaps being disappointed when it doesn't quite live up to the expectations. And also often a time the holidays is, whether people are aware of it or not, people take time to often reflect back on what happened over the course of the year and whether what actually happened lined up with their expectations of what they hoped would happen. So that's a big stressor right there, just what this time tends to mean for people. Dealing with loss comes up a lot around this time of the year. So whether it's a recent loss or a past loss, and whether that means the loss of a loved one or for people dealing with health conditions, often just the loss of what people were able to do in the past and maybe are not quite able to do or have to do with modifications these days. So these losses are things that tend to come up and are, again, stressors that around this time of year tend to come to the front lines. Of course, there's also just whether it's travel or restricted travel at this time of year. So that can be just hectic and burdensome. The financial burdens of having to plan for the holidays. And then when you have a health condition on top of all of this, a lot of other stressors come up. So this might be a time of the year, whether traveling or not, where people reconnect with family, friends, other loved ones or supports. And this concept of having to explain myself, whether that means having to answer questions about my condition that either feel perhaps too personal or maybe not asked in the right way, or maybe feeling like people just don't really get it, that even if people are very supportive, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone can really get inside your body and see what it feels like to be living with whatever you're dealing with. And that's another stressor where you're kind of confronted around this time of year with, again, whether in person or on the phone or Zoom, just talking to people where constantly sort of having to navigate, how do I explain this to other people? The reality is that people often, whether it's, again, a health condition, a disability, caring for other people, or just this time of year, often needing to pace yourself. And we'll probably get into that a little bit more later, but this may not be the pace that everyone else is moving at. So people may have all sorts of plans for the holidays, and it's really hard to have to say, well, actually, I can't do that, or I can't do that at the same pace. Similarly, managing symptoms. So not being sure if you're dealing with something chronic, what symptoms might come up in a new place, an unfamiliar place, what happens when I'm out of the safety net of my home, or what symptoms might just come up around the holidays that I don't really feel like dealing with because I want to enjoy myself. So all these things too. And then again, with COVID on top of all this, there's a lot of additional stressors that I think most humans were never really equipped to face or were not meant to face, such as just a constant threat about either actual illness that may have happened to you or someone you know, feared illness. I think we're really not used to both being worried about passing something along as well as contracting something. And the concept that anyone can be a threat is really not something that I think we're, well equipped to manage. Social isolation, of course, is a big one. And holidays are a time where people like to come together, and it's the very thing that people are advising us not to do. When stressed, also, we need our social support. So to be told at this time of year that, every last state that is on the quarantine list is really upsetting to a lot of people. And the lastly, just uncertainty about the future. So we don't know how long this is going to last. There's no timestamp on this, and this has been going on, I think, for longer than a lot of people imagined. So the next thing is just talking about noticing stress around the holiday season, and this can be noticing stress really at any time. But I think a lot of the times, stress can be something that kind of plays in the background without people having a really good radar for it. So stress can be something very acute. There's a major stressor and you're reacting, or it can be more chronic, such as, again, any type of health condition, medical illness, disability. I would definitely call the COVID-19 pandemic a chronic stressor at this point. And stress can really be obvious or hidden. So sometimes we're really aware, our rent is due, we don't have the money, that's a pretty obvious stressor, or it can be hidden. So sometimes when something's been playing for so long in the background, even around the time of the holidays, I think people don't often think about the holidays as something chronically stressful, but when we've had to for so long navigate and make decisions about, do we go, do we not go, how do we interact with people, can I interact with people, what are the rules going to be, that at that point is a chronic stressor, and it really can weigh on the body. So we know that stress can have impacts on physical symptoms, emotions, behaviors, and cognition or thinking skills. So I'll go through just some of these, but I think when we think of stress often, we might think of anxiety or just this like mental unease, but stress actually almost always goes to the body first. So some signals that you might be stressed are things like noticing, my chest feels tight or I'm holding my breath, sometimes clenching muscles or clenching your jaw pain. Some people get headaches. Some people have GI issues. Fatigue and exhaustion are other big ones. This is what we think of when we think of the fight or flight mechanism. So that's that mechanism that evolved for good reasons over time to help us prepare if there's really something to run from or fight, that we can do that on the spot without having to think about it. Our bodies and our brains are really not meant to stay in a fight or flight mode for a long period of time. Often this happens. We deal with it, we breathe, and we kind of come back to baseline. But it is the case that when there are chronic stressors, your body is still sort of in this heightened state for longer than it's really meant to be. And the stress hormone of cortisol rises. And, at that point, all sorts of things can happen, and it can actually exacerbate health conditions and just lead to feeling like it's a lot harder to manage the multiple stressors that come someone's way. So emotionally, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed, kind of not knowing, like, what do I even tackle first? Feeling more sensitive, and I think around the holidays, sensitivities are up, and maybe taking things personally or feeling like slighted or I wasn't included. I think those feelings can kind of come up for people. Feeling irritable and quick to anger, maybe reacting more quickly than you would before. Again, the sensitive antenna being way up at this time of year. Other people report things like crying easily, having trouble controlling worry, even if it's a worry that they know nothing's going to come of it. If I worry, it's not going to change the outcome. And then other symptoms like feeling anxious, depressed, blue, lonely. And I think loneliness is maybe one that already can happen, but is a big one these days when we're so socially isolated. So other symptoms of stress might be behavioral, getting into arguments or being really quick to snap at someone. For some people, and especially in this time, perhaps using more substances, using that as a way to cope when you're stuck at home and don't really have so many outlets. That's something that I know has been a pattern that some people have started or gone back to. Trouble sleeping is a big one. I think there's a lot of literature on this recently, and especially due to kind of the lack of maybe time outdoors. That comes up, as well as withdrawing from others. And lastly, just symptoms such as like confusion or brain fog, trouble concentrating or remembering, and having trouble making decisions. So I want to say, and Dr. Connor and I were talking a lot about this, that the first rule of thumb is really it's okay to feel this way. And I think just kind of letting that sink in for a minute, because I think often people have the feeling that I should be managing better than this, or God, it's been so long since the loss, I should be over this by now. We call these, in our stress management class that Dr. Connor and I sometimes run, the should statements, which are important to look out for. And just because something's been going on for a while doesn't mean that you should be immune to it. These are very natural reactions that happen, and experiencing stress and grieving a loss is all part of being human. We're hardwired to do this. The fight or flight mechanism that we just discussed is another hardwired response to stress that our body should go through in an effort to protect us. And really, our minds are designed to feel sad. So if this has been a difficult time for a lot of reasons, again, whether there's been loss more recent or in the past, that sadness might come and go, and it might come back more strongly at certain times of the year. We think a lot about anniversaries and times of year where it reminds us of something that has been lost, especially kind of milestones. So 5 years or 10 years, sometimes feelings just kind of come back more strongly at those times of year. And again, we talked about just the loss of oneself due to a medical condition or loss of your lifestyle due to the pandemic. I think no matter what means people have or where they live, there's been a lot of disruptions to schedules, and this is not how people thought 2020 would go. I think also making the point that while anxiety and sadness don't feel good, these feelings can't hurt. Acknowledging them rather than trying to sweep them under the rug can really help to process what's going on, and is really the first step to ultimately feeling better. So I think distraction is a powerful tool. I think we've all been in a situation where it's like you have a busy work day or, something, a lot of errands to run, and you're just not thinking about all this. It helps, but it's not a cure-all. So stress and sadness go somewhere, and usually by talking about it or addressing it in some way helps more. So the last point, talking about these emotions can help, whether that's with people a professional, friends and family. But for some people, actually having time to yourself is quite helpful too. So just the importance of carving out that time to acknowledge, know it's okay, and grieve in your own way, or do whatever you need to do to experience the emotions that are natural. So the next two slides are really about planning ahead and just kind of managing expectations for the holiday season, because I think if we have a sense of what to expect, it's much easier to feel in control. Even if you can't control how someone else responds, just knowing you have a plan going in can help. So I think we think of expectations as, how I might predict or hope I would act versus other people. And some of the ones that might get us into trouble are expectations that I need to please everyone. I think that's a big one around the holiday season. Like, everyone has different things that they need, and I have to be the one, or I am always the one to, give up my needs to kind of please my aunts, my cousins, whoever it may be. The sense that I need to just kind of grin and bear it. So it's the holiday season, I need to just suck it up and keep going. And, all this may not be very possible when you're dealing with some type of health or medical condition. The other expectation is that when other people ask me what's going on, I have to tell them, or I have to divulge details. So some other ways to look at this may be things like, my expectation is that I will actually prioritize my health and well-being, and maybe knowing in advance what that looks like. So whether it's, I'm going to tell people if I need a break, I'm going to make sure that I'm only one person, I can't meet everyone's needs. So I'm going to listen, but I'm also going to, let them know what I need as well. Similarly, speaking up when I need a break, and also telling others what I feel comfortable sharing. So maybe having a sense in advance of, if someone asks me, what I'm going through, whether I'm still dealing with such and such, here's what I'm going to say. Doesn't mean I'll like their response or that, they'll get exactly what I need, but it kind of cuts out the decision-making process in the moment when it's already feeling stressful and overwhelming. So expectations for others, expecting that others know what you need. And I think it would be great if other people kind of knew without having to be told. But I think the reality is usually that, we can't expect people to be mind readers, and it might actually, similar to kind of what we can do to be in control, it might require educating other people. So might also have expectations that other people will kind of keep it together and manage their anxiety, and also expectations that people will know what to say and ask the right questions. So if we kind of shift the expectations to still be positive and in our favor, but maybe a little bit different, such as they may not know what I need, but I can expect that they should listen when I share information. And that's sort of a basic human right and entitlement. That other people might be reacting to stress. So I think, again, stress abounds around the holiday time. So just because someone else may not be dealing with the same things doesn't mean they won't be reactive to stress. And this might be particularly important to keep in mind so as not to take people's reactions overly personally, and just knowing that, other people in one's life are not immune to stress either, and they may be acting differently than normal or having a reaction to you that's different from normal, but that may just be a product of their own stress going on. And I think the last expectation is it's okay to expect someone to respect privacy. So it may not be that they know what to say or how to ask about what you're going through, but if you share what you're comfortable sharing and let them know that, this is kind of what I feel comfortable sharing, at that point, the expectation can realistically be that they listen to that. So the next slide, I'm gonna enlist my colleague here, Dr. Connor, and I think we're gonna do a little bit of a role play for this one. So this is just kind of knowing limits and creating scripts. So this is really anticipating conversations that might come up around the holidays and possibly planning responses in advance that can help you just feel like you're meeting your needs, you're identifying your comfort levels, and have a greater sense of control. So Dr. Connor, I will let you take it away here.
Sure. So let's pretend that we are calling one another, okay? So, hey, Joanna, how are you?
Hey, Felicia. I'm good. How's it going this time of year?
Oh, going good, going good. I'm really looking forward to seeing you during our Thanksgiving dinner. What time are you coming?
Oh, so I'm so sorry. I don't know if you actually got my message, but I'm not going to be able to make it this year. I had sent you a message. I think just with my health and with the COVID situation, it's really going to be a little too hard for me to do it this year.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I didn't quite think about that. I'm glad you're telling me. I don't think I would have understood that. So, thanks for letting me know. So we'll go on to the next one. Hey, Joanna, I was reading a book. I know you've been, diagnosed with cancer, and I heard about this great green diet that, I think could be really helpful. They say on Dr. Oz that it can prevent cancer recurrence.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you looking out for me, and thanks for thinking of me when you saw Dr. Oz. Actually, I think there's a lot of misconception about this. I wish it was the case that I could just change my diet and it would just change my cancer odds. But, I've actually spoken extensively to my doctor, my treatment team about this. I actually have a really good treatment team, which is great. And after reading more about it and speaking at length with them, thankfully, there's actually no link that I know of between diet and cancer. So I can be pretty sure that, nothing I was doing before really caused this. And again, it would be great if a magic pill or a diet, could change things for me. But I think I'm just going to really have to stick to my treatments and hope for the best.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm always happy to look out, but thanks for letting me know. So I am calling you again. Ring, ring.
Hello again, Felicia.
Hey, Joanna, how are you?
I'm good. What's going on?
Yeah, nothing. So I'm really looking forward to our day off, with the holidays. I was just looking around and thinking about some ideas. Why don't we go on a long hike? And then after the hike, I thought we could go to the grocery store and then we can cook some of our favorite meals from, back in college.
That sounds really awesome. And, I really, really wish that I had the stamina for all of those things. Sometimes it really sucks that in the past that would have been like my ideal day. But right now I really need to pace myself because I do still get tired easily. But I'm wondering if we could actually just do a short hike, and maybe I still do get tired even after a short hike. So maybe rather than cooking dinner, we can just order dinner instead. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, that still sounds super fun. Okay. So let's pretend I just saw you in the grocery store. Hey, Joanna, it's so good to see you. It's been such a long time.
Felicia, you are everywhere these days. Nice running into you again.
I know. Yeah, so how are things going?
They're good for the most part, but I've really just, I have this vestibular condition, and I've honestly been dizzy most days. This is like my first time out in probably weeks, and I'm feeling well enough. Thank you so much for asking. I wish I had a better report for you.
Wow, you're still dealing with dizziness and balance problems this long?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope things get better.
Thank you for saying that. I do too.
Sure.
So I really appreciate doing this with Dr. Connor. Always fun to like lighten it up with a role play. And I'll pass it on to Dr. Connor in a minute, but I think, you know, in this situation, and Dr. Connor, I don't know, should one of us maybe mute just while, and then I'll pass it to you and I'll mute. I think I'm still hearing some background noise. Okay, thanks. So I think these are obviously very scripted situations, and this is not understandably how everyone's going to just take it and respond. So some of this is just kind of examples of what might come up and some examples for responding. But I think with the last one, maybe we just wanted to make the point that people might ask things, but it doesn't mean that you have to give a long-winded explanation and explain yourself. You know, I think sometimes just saying, yes, I am still dealing with something might be enough of a response if you feel comfortable saying something like that, or yes, this is stressful, and not needing to kind of give people, you know, an overwhelming amount of information. So I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Connor, and I thank you everyone for, again, joining. Okay.
Thanks, Dr. Wolfson. So, you know, when we think about control, you know, with this pandemic, a lot of us have felt like there is a lack of control. There are a lot of things happening with this pandemic. For instance, like Dr. Wolfson said, we don't know how long this will last, and we don't know how long, you know, restrictions will be in place, and that we will be inconvenienced and, you know, be forced to make changes that we didn't foresee. You know, this locus of control, you know, it's really a model that looks at the belief we have control over events that affect our lives. So again, you know, there may feel like there's a loss of control in our life, you know, things related to our health, our finances, especially during the holiday season. And we know we can lessen that feeling or lack of control when, you know, we have a different perspective, or we change the narrative on, you know, what we're experiencing and what we're feeling. So if you look at the image to your right, well, to my right, you know, you look at the circle of some of the items that we can control. So, you know, as this fox is kind of thinking about, you know, these different items, these are the things that are within our control that we want to spend time, you know, perhaps, you know, not just worrying about, but perhaps being proactive about, you know, making some changes that will impact us in a positive way. All of the items outside of that circle are things that we don't have control over anyway. And so sometimes we can find ourselves thinking or worrying for longer periods of time about things that we can't control even by worrying. So, thank you. So here, I just wanted to highlight, you know, just some items that, you know, things that can be within our control and outside of our control. You know, we know it's natural to worry. We all worry, but we know it can be unhelpful, again, when we focus on things that are outside of our control. So I'm going to talk about hypothetical worries. Again, so those are the things that we can't control. So that's going to be on the right, on my right side listed. But then there is practical worry, and those are the things that we can control. So when I think about practical worry, I think about following the latest information and advice as it relates to COVID. You know, I can't control the pandemic, but I can control how I respond to it. So that is following the CDC's guidelines on what I should do to protect myself and to protect my family. You know, that gives me a sense of control there, and I can feel good about that. But when we think about a hypothetical worry, that could be the weather. You know, we can't control what's happening in the weather. And if we spend too much time on that, again, that's a lot of, energy that we're putting towards something that, will have no bearing on the worries that we have. As I look at this list of the things that I can control, I think most people feel comforted when they have a routine. They have some sort of structure that really helps in a time when it feels like everything is chaotic around you. You watch the news, or if you're on social media, or you're dealing with a health condition and you've had to go to the doctor, and maybe you got some news that you didn't expect, or was not favorable. Knowing that, okay, I have that information, but when I think about the items again within my control, I can control my routine. I can control what I choose to do to relax, whether that is taking a walk or reading or spending time with friends. Another one that sticks out to me is seeking and offering support. For a lot of us, even when we don't feel so good, or we feel a little anxious or worried, sometimes we can feel a little better by giving some support to someone else. I also think it's really important during this time to, think about the resources that you have, and also seek out other resources, to help you during this time. So, I also think about building resilience, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and finding my center, and that is more from a meditation standpoint, thinking about, what calms me down, what brings me back to a time where it's like, okay, these are the things that I can think about or meditate on, and they make me feel good. Even if it's just for a moment, those moments are really important. When we look again to my right on items that are outside of my control, again, we see the list of things that, we don't have any bearing on, but we have a sense of, we can feel good by knowing that we're putting energy into the things that we can manipulate. So one of the first things I think it's really important to do is to check in with yourself. I don't know if anyone's ever, thought about, some of these things first before, you may be responding to, something that's stressful, or you may be worried about something that is happening. And you may forget about those basic necessities, and we've all done it. Dr. Wolfson, she said just before the presentation, I think I'm just getting around to eating. So it happens to us too, where, we get so busy and focused on the day that we forget some of those necessities. When we don't take the time to take inventory and to check in with ourselves, we are highly susceptible to stress and anxiety. And our stress response may be more significant than it usually would have been. So one of the questions I like to ask, anybody, or even I ask myself, if I'm taking inventory, how was my sleep last night? If it is not the way that I'd like it to be, then what do I need to do to change it? I need to create a new routine, or I need to figure out what barriers are in the way of getting the restful sleep that I need. I also may need to talk to my physician and ask those questions about how to get, and maintain a better sleep routine. When's the last time I exercised? Whether it is doing chair yoga, or, taking a walk, or doing, getting on a treadmill, exercise, and we've all heard it. I think sometimes it can feel cliche, but it really does matter, in our overall health. When was the last time we had a meal? If we missed breakfast, did we make sure to have lunch? That is really important. And, oftentimes people will, report symptoms that are really related to the fact that they weren't hydrated. So sometimes people get headaches or migraines, and sometimes it's really about not hydrating ourselves. Also, when's the last time we took our vitamins or supplements? So whether it's you have a good routine for that or not, especially during this time, I've seen in this community, especially for the patients I've been working with, really thinking a lot about medication and supplements. We know we don't get everything that we need, most of us from food. So we want to make sure that we're taking those supplements and that they are filling in those gaps. So I want to talk about gratitude and really how important it is. So we know gratitude is especially important during this time. And we know that gratitude can protect us from negative or draining emotions and that are related to stress, anxiety, or depression. We know that gratitude also can shift us, can shift those thoughts to more positive, productive thoughts, and can give us a sense of happiness and abundance and love. You know, here I want to highlight that there are two images. One on my right is the gratitude log. And if you've ever done this, you may appreciate how helpful it can be to take a moment and to think about all of the things that you are, you are thankful for. And I've done this with my children. I've done this for myself. And, I find that if I am deliberate or intentional about creating a gratitude log, I see, sometimes I've seen things change. Like, wow, I am now appreciating this more than I was before. So I really invite, everybody to take a moment from time to time to really fill in a gratitude log, or to make a list, or to think about the things that you, feel very thankful for. On the left-hand side is an image of a man who is taking a gratitude walk. If you've never taken one, there are two types. One is one where you, engage in continuous movement, and you tie your expressions of gratitude to each step. So I take a step, I'm grateful for my family. I take another step, I'm grateful for the sunny day. I take another step, I'm grateful for the good news I got at the doctor. So if you've never done that, it can be a humbling experience and one that, can be enjoyable. The second one is more of a slower walk, and it's more stop and go. And it's a very contemplative walk because you would take a notepad or a piece of paper, and you would just take a moment to notice things in your environment that you're grateful for. The benefits of this gratitude walk are actually tremendous. One, it calms you down. It recenters you. It breaks you free of some of those negative thoughts that you may be having. It rewires your brain to think differently. So you may be more open to some things that you weren't open to before. If you were in an office or you were at home, it really just gets you outside of yourself. We know that walking in general increases blood circulation, so that's never a bad thing. It also helps you create a real appreciation. So it's, I know we're going into the winter months, but, let's say you can't take a gratitude walk outside. Maybe you live in an apartment complex. Maybe you're walking down the hallway, or you're walking into the lobby. I think that we can take some of these strategies, and we can be flexible in the way that we use them, depending on the environment we're in. So the next technique, and I'm full of techniques here and different tricks and tips, but this is called the 5-4-3-2-1 coping technique. So the real purpose is to ease your mind and to help you go, and help you to just kind of pause, especially as you're dealing with stressful moments. It's something you can do anywhere, which is nice. It's free. And you don't need a lot of other resources other than yourself. Before proceeding, you want to take a few deep breaths, and then you want to ease into the following steps. So we start with 5. Notice 5 things you can see, and you can pick between small things or large items, and you move to the next, which is, notice 4 things you can, 4 things that you can touch. So that's just being mindful of, what's around you, the ground underneath you. Right now, as I'm talking, I am just being mindful of what I'm feeling. And it does require me to focus on those steps. And so that's what's really nice about it. Number 3, notice 3 things you can hear. For some people, they get at least 2 items, but sometimes the third one can be tricky, or, they have to really pay attention and listen. Notice 2 things you can smell. And if you're in a room that's not fragrant, then maybe you want to move to the kitchen or the bathroom. Kitchen if you're someone who cooks, there may be some nice smells there. In the bathroom, there may be soaps or candles that you enjoy. So noticing those can be really calming. And number one, notice one thing you can taste. So if you're sitting at home, you're like, well, gosh, I don't taste anything. Think back to something you tasted earlier in the day. Was it your mint toothpaste? Was it something you had for breakfast? As you can see, this is a very flexible technique. And lastly, you want to take a couple of deep breaths just to end the exercise. So I actually enlisted a couple of my family members to do this, and they were great sports. And they said that, at least while they were trying the technique, they were really focused on the steps. And so that's what I wanted to hear, the fact that you could, pull yourself away from what you were thinking. Ready? And I'll try to wrap us up in just a few minutes, but I want to talk a little bit about building resilience. Resilience is not something that we're just born with, but resilience is built up over time. And it's really beneficial through, times of stress and hardships and pandemics. I want you to look at the first image there, and it may be hard to see, but in this first image, if you can imagine that this seesaw is like balance. It's balancing the negative outcomes and the positive outcomes. And, these are things that we're all experiencing in our lives. And we know that if we want to, let's say we want to tip the scale into more positive outcomes, then we want to make sure that we have good coping skills and that we're doing things and being very mindful so that we can, so that the fulcrum, which is that triangle in the middle, is, the balance that we're trying to achieve. And so balance can be hard to achieve, but not impossible in terms of thinking about, what are the things that you want in your life and what should you be intentional about? When we look at the second image, if we find that, things feel unbalanced, we want to find a way to unload that negative stress. And so what that means is, we want to meet our basic needs. And we want to practice self-care, so by doing those two things, we can unload some of that negative stress. We look down to the image at the bottom on my left-hand side, and we look at, for us to load the positive side, we've got to make more connections. Again, using our resources and making sure that we're connecting with people. It may not be in person, it may be in a forum like this, but making sure that we're doing that is really key. And the last image is, the individual has moved the fulcrum a little bit more and feels like things are more balanced. And so for this person, they created a sense of structure and they followed a resilience plan. And I'm going to talk about that just for a couple of seconds. Thank you, Dr. Wolfson. So, as we've talked about resilience, again, it's a process. We are not born with it. And we use that resilience to adapt to all of the different challenges that we face in life. So in order to do that, we want to, perhaps for someone, create a plan. So structure is important. And we know that if we have structure, we feel pretty positive. And we feel more control over our world. With the pandemic, and there being a lack of control or feeling like there's a lack of control, we want to give ourselves that control back. Before creating a stress resilience plan, one of the things I invite you to do is to think about 3 to 5 items that are on your must-do list for the day. So something that keeps you grounded. If you're having trouble creating that plan, maybe think back to one of the best days that you had. What was good about that day? What were the components? And we use some of those items to create this plan. So I want to highlight just a couple. I think number one is really important, making an appointment with yourself with no cancellation. So I have to admit, sometimes I have trouble with this. Dr. Wolfson said to me when we were working on this presentation that she sometimes has trouble with this. And what I find is I'm less likely to cancel on someone else, but I am more likely to cancel on myself. So we want to shift that a bit, and we want to make room for us, and make ourselves the priority, like Dr. Wolfson was saying earlier, in terms of, being mindful of the things that stress us out or that, create that distress, and making sure we're making some appointments with ourselves to pour into ourselves. If you can imagine that you have that your emotional bank is depleted because you've given to everyone else and you've done things and overcommitted, you want to make more deposits so that you're able to sustain yourself and do the things that you want to do. Engaging in meditation for a few minutes is really important for a lot of people, whether it's deep breathing or prayer. I think that can be really important. Maybe, reviewing your conversation script, like Dr. Wolfson and I were talking about, as we anticipate people asking you questions, making sure you feel really good about your script and your plan. Also, some of those daily things that we talked about in terms of scheduling exercise and, using medications and supplements to make sure you're filling in the gaps. Also, I'm looking at the bottom, preparing for the next day before. How do you plan for success the night before? So, maybe I'm taking some time to look at, what does my day look like? Maybe I have a couple of appointments and I have some expectations of some things I want to get done. Well, maybe that means I need to, refocus that and think about, okay, what is really that priority for the day? And so, from a productivity standpoint, sometimes with the stress resilience plan, people want to feel like they have good structure and they want to feel like they've attacked the day and that they got something out of the day. So, I say to make sure you make your MIT list. Most important task of the day. Don't pick more than 2 or 3. Sometimes we can pick more items than we need, and then we feel overwhelmed and disappointed when we can't get those done. So I've been talking a lot about this, something called eating the frog, which is, really working on the task that is most important first. So stress resilience plans look different for everybody. And there's something that any of us can make, and they're really good to kind of to check and see, like, hey, am I following this plan? If I'm not, why? And we can make those changes. So as we wrap up, one of the things that, some of the takeaways that we would say is, that we know stress and anxiety and worry are all upon us in some way, that it's really important to use the tools that work for you. Also, to make sure you're managing expectations, from your family members or your friends, and even for yourself. And to do things that really speak to you and really, put more into your emotional and physical bank so that you have enough to last. And, I think it's just really important during this time, just to be mindful of what works and what doesn't work, and be okay with changing to things that you think could be more helpful. This quote stuck out to us, which is, do what you can with what you've got where you are. And it just reminds us that we all have tools that we can use, and we can all use them right away. We don't always have to go and find them. So remember the tools that you have, and thank you so much for taking the time out on a Tuesday evening to spend it with Dr. Wolfson and I. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Connor and Dr. Wolfson, for all the helpful tools. I know the holidays are a very stressful season, and even more so this year, so that was all very helpful. Just a reminder to anyone, if you have any questions, there is a Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen, so you can feel free to write in any questions. And I did get one question from a participant right before we got started. They wanted to know if they were interested in making an appointment with either of you or someone from your department. How would they go about doing so?
Sure, I can, everyone can hear me, I assume.
Can hear you.
You can hear me, okay. So really glad that Dr. Connor and I made an impression, and glad that people just gets people jump started and thinking about what might be helpful. And so we do have a psychology department. It's actually through Rusk Rehab in particular, but we do see individuals with medical conditions through all different aspects of the hospital. So the first step, if people are interested in being referred to the psychology department, is having a conversation with their doctor. So if you have a doctor at NYU and the doctor does think that it would be a good fit, they would place a referral to our psychology department. If the doctor is outside of NYU and you wanted to get in touch with myself or Dr. Connor after this, I think, probably, or Rachel, who's running this, we'd be happy to send over a referral form so that you can physically or electronically, send it to your physician and have them place a referral. And here at Rusk, we again see people with a lot of different medical conditions, and usually it's more of a short-term treatment protocol that focuses on really helping people in their kind of recoveries and after the stages of dealing with something that's either happened, injury or illness, or something more ongoing. And we really focus on just kind of like what we presented today, very practical tools.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wolfson. That's very helpful. And if anyone has any other questions or, needs, assistance in getting in touch, you can email us. Our cancer events email address, which you probably have, but it's cancerevents@nyulangone.org. And it doesn't look like there's any other questions as of right now.
Rachel,
so that being said,
Rachel, so sorry. I did see a question about whether that image was in Japan, and yes, it is. So, yep, for the gratitude walk.
Okay. Thank you. All right, and if there's no other final questions, I would like to thank both of our speakers for a wonderful webinar. That was extremely helpful, and we will put those tips to good use. And we hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season. Thanks for participating.